Hey everyone, welcome to Your Virtual Coffee, the web show which introduces you to great local businesses in the Denver metro area. Today, my guest is Zachary Rischitelli, Managing Director for Real FiG Advertising and Marketing. Real FiG is a full-service strategic brand marketing agency that helps companies define their audience through market research, develop their message through branding, logos, websites, and messaging, and deliver that message to the appropriate audience through digital and traditional channels. Real FiG, advertising and marketing. Define, develop, deliver. And with that, Zachary, welcome to my show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
If it's all right with you, can we talk about you a little bit so my audience can get to know you?
Sure.
So I stalked your Facebook profile, for which I apologize. But it was kind of fun. And I noticed you're a big music fan. Who is your favorite artist?
Depends on the day, but probably universally, I'd have to say Pink Floyd is probably number one.
Do you have a favorite Pink Floyd song?
It's probably "Wish You Were Here" is excellent. That's a hard one to beat. But I mean, obviously, they've got
so many.
Yeah, put anything in, and I'm happy. So.
Well, it's interesting you say that because that's probably my favorite Pink Floyd ones. Although "Money" I think is pretty good, and "The Wall."
Yeah,
is also really good.
The Division Bell is one I enjoy quite a bit. Goodbye Blue Sky. Yeah, there's a there's a lot.
We could spend this whole show just talking about Pink Floyd.
Oh, definitely.
Okay, so when you're not jamming to Pink Floyd or other great music, what do you like to do for fun?
I'm a big movie buff. Definitely, enjoy those. Outside of that, like to read. News junkie, but also generally fiction, that sort of thing. And hiking. It's Colorado. It's beautiful in the summer, and getting up in the mountains try to do that as many weekends as I can when it's not 110 degrees or whatever it felt like it was this summer. But other than that.
What's your favorite movie genre? Do you have a particular one?
I kind of like those more kind of quirky, esoteric movies. Brazil is one of my all-time favorites. Is very weird dystopian take on kind of 1984 by Terry Gilliam. So that's a way up there. But I mean, again, it kind of depends on the day. Your mood really dictates what your favorite genre is that day. So.
Well, speaking of dystopian, because I am a huge fan of that genre as well, both reading and movies, do you find some of the newer movies kind of rip off some of the classic books, the classic dystopian books?
Yeah, I mean, there's that thing, there's only like 7 stories in the world. So, they're going to repeat a little bit. But yeah, it definitely feels like that. In general, especially this year, because so many of, I think, the new movies have been kind of held back and not released, is that you're kind of getting the ones that just feel kind of like a retread, or you get some really unique, weird stuff that, you might not have noticed otherwise because it's kind of trickling out through streaming rather than little independent theaters. But yeah, it definitely feels like, especially this year, it feels like there's a lot of retread going on, and just not a lot of things that are really catching my eye, I guess. Yeah.
Well, I find when I'm watching, let's say the Hunger Games trilogy was when I really realized it. I started and I'm like, gosh, this is a lot like 1984 and Brave New World. Like it's like just an amalgamation of both. And now you see it with not only the Hunger Games, I've seen it with The Giver, and there's that one series that's like Allegiant, Insurgent, or something like that.
I haven't seen those. I mean, to be fair, The Giver is a pretty good book. I enjoyed that one, in book form. I didn't actually see the movie. I heard it was little disappointing.
As
yeah,
they always are, right?
Yeah, exactly. But speaking of Hunger Games, just to go a little movie nerd on you here, have you seen Battle Royale? It's a Japanese movie that has pretty much the exact same plot and came out about a decade before the Hunger Games books came out. So speaking of retreads, I don't know that they're connected, but it sure feels very similar.
Interesting. I haven't, but you're the second person who's mentioned Battle Royale to me. So I'm going to have to check that out. See if it's on streaming.
Yeah, it's a little more R-rated, a little more gory, but it's very much the same plot. So
that is interesting. So dystopian, do you enjoy reading dystopian as well? Are there other genres that you prefer regarding that?
Yeah, so when it comes to reading, I mean, I'm a bit of a sci-fi nerd, so that's always fun stuff. That being said, I'm working my way through. I'm blanking on the name. My son got it for me, and Infinite Jest, and it is about this thick. It came out in the 90s. He hasn't read it, but he said he's heard great things about it. I've started it. It's very interesting. I'm a little early into it, but it seems like it's being the narration jumps around a little bit, but the primary narrator seems to be a schizophrenic, but I'm not 100% sure because they haven't directly addressed it, but it's a very interesting narrator to the story. So
you get into the unreliable narrator.
Yeah, that can be a lot of fun. Yeah,
it can be. I think a couple of books on that come to mind for me. Catcher in the Rye with Holden Caulfield, who is very unreliable. And then Flowers for Algernon, where you have Charlie, who's have you read either of those?
I read Catcher in the Rye, in high school a million years ago. I have not read Flowers for Algernon, but I've heard Algernon. I've heard it's good though.
It is very good. It's someone who's intellectually disabled. So you're reading his words, you're reading how he would say things and refer to things. And then you sometimes have to figure out, what is Charlie actually talking about here? Which I think can still be a good thing because it still tells the story. It's a perception thing. And I find that very interesting.
I think when you get into books that where, it kind of reinforces perception is reality, is a really interesting theme, and that, like you said, it's that person's perception of what's happening, and it's potentially the perception they're trying to have you take away from it as the reader, is, I think, really interesting. And having that that mindset around how do you present these ideas, and is it real, is it not, and does it really matter, because that's what you're able to take away from it. So.
Okay, I have to ask about this because we've gone down the dystopian path. Where do you come down on the Planet of the Apes movies?
So the original one, great movie. The sequels progressively worse. I did really like the remake trilogy. Rise and
with James Franco.
Yeah. That I really enjoyed that trilogy quite a bit. The third one was a little weaker, but overall I thought that was good. I have not seen the Tim Burton one, but
I'll just tell you, don't.
that's why. Not heard a lot of good things. So.
I think Tim Burton is a brilliant director. It just didn't work for this one, for that particular one. Although from what I understand, his version was actually the most accurate to the books, because in the books, they were far more advanced. They had far more advanced methods of transportation rather than horses. But okay. Still, yeah, I just tell people, it's kind of like the Terminator series, just skip over the one in the middle. For Terminator, just skip over the fourth one, the Salvation one, and just go right to the one that talks about Genesis. Much better.
Salvation is the last one I saw. I've had a hard time getting excited to see them after that one. So four was because it was that was the fourth one, right? It was, and the third one not great, but 1 and 2 still top notch. But yeah, I should go watch Genesis one of these days.
Yeah, Genesis, and then the last one that they just did like within the last year.
Okay.
Which I'm drawing a blank on the name, but basically if it has Arnold in it, you can't go wrong. And he's in both of the two newer ones that are both quite good. Plus they kind of do what the Planet of the Apes last trilogy did. They refer back to the original, which is good because you're sitting there like, oh my gosh, I know what that is. They're gonna do this scene again. So highly recommend them. Okay. For a while they were on Hulu. I'm not entirely sure where those are now, but highly recommend those. And I agree with you wholeheartedly on the Planet of the Apes. Although the second one was kind of interesting because you had humans singing and worshiping a bomb, which is quite, praise be the bomb, is interesting. And then the one where they go back in time, I think is the third one, I thought was pretty interesting as well, because there was a lot of ethical issues raised during that one. That was pretty good.
I'll have to go back and rewatch that one. It's been a while since I've watched the sequels. I saw the first one again not too long ago, but I'll have to go back and rewatch the sequels.
Now let's pivot for a minute, because this has been fun, and I'm sure my audience is like, are you ever going to talk about his business? How did you get started in marketing, Zachary?
It was not a direct road, but basically, long story short, I got a bachelor's degree with a double major in psychology and anthropology. And with a bachelor's degree, you can't do much with either of those. You definitely need at least a master's to, barely eke out a living, and a PhD to really do anything with it. And so I think, like a lot of people with a liberal arts degree, I ended up in sales. And I my first I went through kind of a sales internship, kind of got the basics of B2B sales down, and then moved into a sales role at a relatively large digital marketing agency. And that's really kind of how I got started in marketing, was on the account side. In that case, it was a very large, clientele. We were buying more Google AdWords than anybody else in North America at the time. Big national accounts. But from there, I moved into a sales director role at a smaller, more design-oriented boutique agency. Still did the digital marketing, just for much smaller clients, but also brought in more the brand side of things. And then really what I saw at both the large and the small agencies was I'd go out, I'd meet people, we'd talk about what their needs are, we'd set some expectations together, give them a sign off, bring it back to the agency, hand it off to the production team. And then I'd kind of lose touch with that client a little bit. And then a couple of weeks later, they'd be calling me going, hey, I can't get a hold of this person, or they just showed me something and I don't know why this is what they're doing. And so they start missing the expectations that we so carefully set together. And the production team just wasn't quite in alignment. And I found that breakdown in communication was incredibly frustrating, because I'm going out and building this relationship with these people. And so ultimately, ended up leaving that smaller agency pretty much right at the end of 2008, when everything was on fire from the financial collapse there. And then kind of pivoted to, all right, well, let's get some clients and let's get some people to do the work for them. And then over time, it started out with a couple of partners. Over time, I kind of was the last man standing from the partnership perspective, built a team that basically has to do what I sell, because they answer to me, because they're now my employees as my own agency here. And so we started unofficially then 2008, officially at the very beginning of 2009. It'll be our 12-year anniversary here coming up in February. It's been a fun adventure, kind of building out this marketing agency, as things have changed so much in the last decade or so. I mean, it's always changing in marketing, but the technology is always throwing something new at you and staying on top of it. So it's been a fascinating ride, but kind of an indirect route into marketing. But honestly, can't imagine doing anything else these days.
Well, it sounds like you were able to take kind of what you didn't like about the previous company you were with, such as you mentioned, the breakdown in communication and lack of a streamlined process, and you were able to turn the negatives into a positive by creating your own agency and fulfilling those needs. Would that be correct?
Yeah, that was really kind of the goal. You know, I used to, kind of joke around for the first couple of years that the success for the first few years was basically just looking at my old employers and going, what would they do? And then doing the opposite. It's a little harsh, but, it definitely was something where, okay, can we do this better? And so a lot of the thought was, can we build a better communications process, better accountability, better reporting, and better just kind of general interaction with the client, and then to kind of build the agency around that. And so that's really where we kind of started out. So.
Well, speaking of doing things better, what is an issue that keeps your client up at night, and how does Real FiG solve that issue?
Sure. I think that the biggest one is, there's two. Either they're just not seeing enough coming into their sales pipeline. They may be operating mostly off of word of mouth, or they may have a sales guy who's out there doing his best, hustling for business. But especially right now during the kind of current challenges of 2020. You're seeing more limitation on the ability just to go out and meet people that you used to have. And so not having that inbound business. So that's one. The other one would be they've hired a marketing company, and what's keeping them up at night is going, I'm spending all this money and I have no idea what I'm getting back for it. And so that would be the other piece of it is they've either hired somebody and they're not getting that reporting, they're not getting that communication, they're not seeing the results, or if they are, they don't know what to look for those results because there's no differentiation between what they would have had with or without the marketing. And so that's probably the two pieces there is either I'm not getting enough coming in, or I'm spending money and I have no idea what I'm getting back.
Zachary, let's talk about power partners. And for our audience, power partners are those businesses who target your ideal client but are not your competition. One of the examples I like to use is a real estate realtor and a mortgage broker. They both target that ideal client of potential homeowner, but they don't compete with one another. In fact, they're quite helpful to each other because they can refer business back and forth. So let's get into who Real FiG's ideal client is.
Sure. So our ideal client is, we like to describe it as established small to mid-sized businesses. We do work with startups, but that's usually more on like the branding side of things. So logos and some market research, websites, kind of the things that have a beginning, middle, and end. And so we do some stuff for startups, but our primary client base, the people we work with the most, tend to be those established small to mid-sized businesses. So that's usually, they've been up and going for a couple of years, maybe 3 years plus. They've got a historical record of their product or their service and the clients that work well with those. They've got success stories. They've got things to talk about. They have data to analyze. That's always helpful. And then it's also something to look at it too as they're at the point where marketing stops being about buying a thing. They're not just buying a website or they're buying a logo. They're not buying a thing. They're investing in a long-term solution. And that's really the mindset that you start to get around that year, like 3, 4, I think, when a business is up and going, is that, okay, we're up and going, we've got something here, let's grow it. And the way we're going to grow that is by investing in our business. And so marketing has to kind of be an investment, not an expense. And so that's why we say established. Small to mid-size can range, obviously, depending on how you define that. But generally somewhere between, let's say, 2 and 50 front office employees. And what I mean by that is those are the people in the office running the show. They might have 1,000 people on payroll out in the field, but the people sitting in the office running the business, usually 50 or less from the front office employee kind of perspective. Geography doesn't really matter. We've got our office here in Denver. We've got a satellite office in Chicago. We've worked with clients in dozens of states. Geography is not so important. It's really about their mindset and their stage of growth. They're ready to invest. They're ready to grow. And they're ready to take it seriously. As far as industries go, we pretty much, you name it, we've done it. And
yeah, you're pretty industry agnostic, right?
We are.
It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, we actually kind of have a policy where we try not to compete against ourselves. So we actually try not to have multiple clients in the same vertical, in the same market that are directly competing against each other. Now there are exceptions, and usually we'll actually check with our existing client before we take on another client, make sure they're comfortable with it. We want to make sure that we're giving each client, the full attention. And if we're competing against ourselves, that sometimes can be an issue. So yeah, we are not going to have 30 plumbers in a market, or 30 business coaches, or whatever it is. We're going to be very careful about making sure that we're giving each client their full attention. So we kind of by definition have to be industry agnostic, because we're not going so deep in any one individual category.
Exactly. Now I'm thinking, based upon who your ideal client is, maybe those HRPEO firms, because those employment benefits type services, they also need businesses of a certain size. They also need businesses who have at least a certain number of employees, like you were just describing.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We like to think of ourselves as an outsourced marketing department. And so companies like a PEO, that's an outsourced HR department, or attorneys who are an outsourced legal department, or an IT company that's an outsourced IT department, managed service providers, those type of folks. Those are really good fits for us, because it is a very similar shape and size. The company's grown to a point where they need to invest in these things, but they're not going to go hire 6 people internally. They're going to bring in an outsourced department, managed service provider, a law firm, a PEO, or something along those lines. So yeah, it's a really good point.
And I think also you kind of touched on it with the word outsource, which the new buzzword now is fractional. But anyone in that fractional space, I mean, Real FiG can be that fractional chief marketing officer for a law firm, or for an architecture firm, CPA firm, whatever business is out there, who may not be large enough to have those people on that, what they call the C-suite level. Mm-hmm. But you can be that for them. Just like there are fractional CPAs and fractional managed service providers, those IT CIOs for businesses. So I think anyone in that space would definitely be a good power partner for you, because you're going towards the same goal, which is to help that business who maybe not quite big enough to have someone full-time doing that job. You can walk in there and help them make that, make that happen.
Oh, absolutely. And if you think about marketing, it's not very often that you're going to find one person who does everything, right? You're going to need graphic design. You're going to need web development. You're going to need writers. You're going to need strategists. You're going to need media buyers. You're going to need, people to procure, your trade show booth, your printing materials. You're going to need, people that are, savvy with those type of vendors. Video production, all these different specialties. There's not a lot of companies that are going to go hire 6 or 7 of these individuals that have all these specialties. You hire something like, somebody like Real FiG, you get that whole team. We have all those specialists ready to go in-house on our end. And so, yeah, it's exactly that. If you hire, a company like ours, it's almost like you have that department, because as a business owner, you're busy doing what you do for your business. We're taking a budget, we're executing that budget, we're reporting on goal performance, just like you would if you had that C-suite. You're delegating that. You're handing that off. Yes, we're working very closely with you. You're involved to some extent in that, but you get to focus on actually running your business and not the nitty-gritty of the marketing. And you've got a whole team that's taking care of that for you. And you're getting those reports back that allow you to make the right decisions. And so, yeah, it very much is. You're getting a whole department. It's not even just a fractional, CMO. It's the CMO plus the department actually executing everything. And then you get to run your business and not have to focus on the marketing side.
So the business owner in our audience who's watching this, they say, wow, I want to talk to that Zachary guy because I really need help. What is the best way for that business owner to reach out to you?
Sure. Obviously, if you go to our website, figadvertising.com, you'll have, phone number right there. You'll have a form fill where you can start that. Certainly feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, Zachary Rischitelli. But yeah, just basically reach out. Let's start that conversation. And we'll have a pretty in-depth, discussion about what you're trying to accomplish, and how we can help you get get a plan in place to achieve those goals.
And we'll include slides at the end of the video that has all this contact information. So if they miss it here, I will include it at the end. So any last thoughts?
I think just the last piece, and this is, I think an educational thing that when people are in that position where they're transitioning into, all right, let's invest in marketing, is to realize what marketing is and is not. And I always like to say marketing's job, generally, unless you're e-commerce, is not to sell your product. It's not to sell your service. It's to sell a conversation. Our job is to get your phone to ring, to get that form to get filled out, to get somebody to walk in your door and say, hey, I want to talk to you before I make a buying decision somewhere else. That's our job as marketers. And that's where I feel like some of that disconnect is that you are hiring marketing professionals to generate a conversation. You still have to sell your product. You still have to sell your service, but we're going to give you that opportunity to talk to so many more people about.
I love that. Zachary, thank you so much for coming on my show. I really appreciate it.
It's been great. Thanks.
Audience, thank you for joining us today on Your Virtual Coffee. We could not do this show without you. Thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe. There should be a subscribe button right down there on our YouTube channel. And business owners, let's talk. Have a great day, everyone. Your Virtual Coffee is sponsored by Ventola Law. Ventola Law, mediation and legal representation at an expert level. You can find them at ventolalaw.com. Thanks for joining me today. For more information on Your Virtual Coffee, check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and wait for it, our website at yourvirtualcoffee.com. Thanks again for watching and have an incredible day.